Hello everyone and welcome to my video. So my name is Joel McDougall, and for our research topic I am going over what's called the constraint layout here in Android. So far in our class we have looked at the linear layout. Today we're going to look at linear layout and kind of compare it to the constraint layout, and that will give us a good idea of the differences between the two and what exactly a constraint layout is. To get started here, I built just a very small app, and in this app we have both layouts available, and we'll look at what they do. So we can see here I have a fragment for the linear layout and a fragment for the constraint layout, and these both show up here in our little program. We see our linear layout and our constraint layout. Okay, so let's look at the difference between the two. So like I said, in class we've looked at linear layout, so we'll look at that one first. And we can see here we can drag a view onto our layout. I'm just going to make them a little bigger so they're easier to see. We can drag on a button here as well. Okay, and we drag on a couple more things. Okay, so these have all been added like we see here in a line. And what's interesting is we cannot move these around. Okay, even though you adjust them, it doesn't really matter. Okay, they cannot be moved. They've all been added in lines sequentially as we've pulled them on. In contrast, when we look at a constraint layout and we start to add things, we can now see that they have been put in a little bit differently. Let me enlarge them here. Okay, and these ones here, we can drag them around and put them wherever we would like. So we have our views where we would like, although we're not quite finished. So I'm going to go through updating my app here. This is apparently a relatively common mistake that people make. We haven't set our constraints yet. So we've put in our views, but we haven't basically set them in place. So I've updated the app here. We can go to the app. We see our linear one where we put in and everything's where we thought it would be. But our constraint, everything has been returned to the 0, 0 position. And the reason for that is, minimize this, we haven't set our constraints in here. So there's a couple of different ways that we can do that. So let's look at how we can kind of choose to put things where we want. Okay, so the first way we will look at is what's possibly the easiest way. So we click on this icon here that says Infer Constraints. So we click on that and we can see that the program has put the constraints in for us. Okay, and we can update this. And we go to our app here. We look at our constraint layout. And now we see everything is where we expect it to be, how we've positioned it here in our editor. Okay, so the second way to add them in is to add them in manually. So let's look at that. So to begin, what we'll do here is we will take off the constraints that we have. We'll click this icon which says Clear All Constraints. We'll click Yes. Now we're going to add them in manually. So there are two ways to add them in manually. The first way here, let's click on a view. So we can go over here to our constraint widget and we can choose any one of these 4 blue circles, and that will add in our constraint for us automatically like that. The other way to do it is to click on the view itself and choose the circles here and drag them over to where you want them to go. Oops, sorry. Okay, and without a vertical one, 2 vertical ones, it'll just kind of pull it to it all the way over. Okay, and now we have these in. We can move our things around as we like. We can re-update our app. And we can see it is moved to where we wanted it to be. Oops. When adding your constraints in manually, there is one thing worth noting. You have to make sure you have at least one constraint horizontal and one constraint vertical. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Let's take off all our constraints here. So let's say for this one, what we'll do is we'll take out the text view here and we'll look at just our button view. Okay, so suppose we put in the vertical ones for the button view, and then we update our app and take a look and see what happens. So it's being held in place vertically, but not horizontally. Okay, and we can see it's moved all the way over to the side here. And if we take these off, and on the vertical ones, or sorry, the horizontal ones, and we see it's moved all the way to the top. However, if we put one on each axis, and now it is held in place. Okay, so a couple other things of note. There are some other icons here, different view options, enable auto connection to parent, things for packing and aligning and putting in some guidelines. These are all different things you can use to manipulate your environment so that your app comes out looking the way you would like it to. I'm going to take off these constraints here. When we go back to our code with no constraints on, you'll notice here that button is now underlined in red. And we come back over here, we're seeing some error messages or at least some warnings. Your app will still run without your constraints in there. So just remember, if you're ever looking at it and everything is stuffed up here in the corner, it's most likely because you didn't have your constraints in. Although the errors are here, it still will let you run it. So that's just one thing to be careful of. Okay, everyone, so that's everything that I have here for constraint layout. As per the requirements of our research project here, there's also a Word documentation that you can look at. If you have any other questions, you can read through there. There's some summaries of everything that we went over through the video here. And there's also some links to the Android developer site, which are pretty good, that go into a lot more detail of the constraint layout that you may find interesting. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this, and take care.